Hello, welcome to the Sovereign Magazine Show, a transformational experience where conscious conversations meet embodied wisdom. Each episode invites visionary healers, thought leaders, and change makers to share their journeys of awakening, offering listeners practical tools and soul stirring insights to reclaim their inner authority. We have back one of my most favorite guests, Abby Tishieta. She is here to talk about her series, The Cycle Breakers Sacred Boundaries. And today we're discussing healing the inner child while parenting children of your own. So why don't you introduce yourself and we can begin.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, I'm Abby and I'm hailing from Treaty 6 territory, which is also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I am a speaker, a published writer, and author. I'm a trauma recovery guide and feminine leadership mentor. I also live with complex PTSD, and I'm in recovery for addiction for the past almost 12 years, which I'm super proud of. And I'm a mama of four, so I have four little ones. And the work I do in the world is I guide cycle breaking women and femmes, especially Black, Indigenous women of color. So these are mothers, healers, coaches, creatives, really move out of isolation and survival and into embodied, community rooted leadership. And the way I do that is by holding spaces where their grief, their rage, their truth, their wisdom can really be witnessed, integrated, and transformed into sovereignty. And so I'm really excited to continue on this conversation. It's been such a gem to just have chats with you about this, and I've been getting a lot of feedback from others who've been tuning into the series as well. And I think this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I am currently living it.
Yeah, yeah. So for anyone who has missed some of the foundational episodes, definitely go back. We talked about like, are you a cycle breaker and what is estrangement and sacred grief? And so now we're moving into ourselves and what it's like to be healing our inner child while we're parenting. And also reparenting ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
so you and I always say we are sisters from different wombs because we have very similar experiences. And I just would love to know a little bit more about like let's define what the inner child is for people who may not even have heard that term and
Mm.
how we can begin to relate that inner child to how we're maybe showing up in parenting.
Well, for me, I had heard about inner child work prior to becoming a mom, and I had dabbled in a little bit of it. And really, the concept of an inner child is this, if you can imagine this younger version of you when you were a child that still very much lives inside of you, right? And so, people talk about letting the inner child out to play. When we dive into the things that used to bring us joy as children, right? Whether it's coloring, painting, dancing, whatever is the case. And it also brings up things that maybe weren't so good, when we were children, that we didn't have an opportunity to process, to move through, to be acknowledged, to be validated, especially when we are the cycle breakers and we come from, kind of these traumatic backgrounds and upbringings and things like that. But I truly didn't fully meet my inner child until I was triggered during parenting, and so I was already about 5 years into my healing and recovery journey when I became a mom. And so I felt, I had a really great foundation already, of healing and really discovering myself and all of that kind of stuff. But much to my surprise, as soon as my children started to reach kind of that toddler age, when, the lot of feelings start coming up, the meltdowns and the tantrums, and I'm using air quotes because they're just very natural expressions that children have to really overwhelming feelings that they don't know, first of all, how to name, how to identify, how to move through safely and process and all of that kind of stuff. And so for me, it was very triggering when I started to experience my children in this way. And I didn't know why. Like it caught me completely off guard how my nervous system would take over, and I would go into this fight and flight kind of place when I would experience them having these big feelings and emotions. And what really, when I started deep diving around this, like, why am I reacting like this? Like, why does this trigger me this way? It came down to my inner child. And it was because I was experiencing them having an experience that wasn't safe for me to have when I was a child, right? And so that activated danger to my nervous system. It was like, danger, this isn't okay, this isn't safe, because it wasn't safe when I was a kid to express myself in these ways. I had to very much shut down that part of myself, that very innate, natural way of expressing myself, right? And so that's when the real work began, and I started to really understand this whole concept of, our inner child, and also the reparenting concept, right? Because this part of us is still there, right? Like, and for me, it was this unhealed part of me. And so now I needed to address this unhealed part of me while also parenting my children. So I always talk about how, like, in my journey, it's very much I'm reparenting little me while I am parenting my children, and then I'm learning as I go and I'm teaching them as I go, right? So, like, I don't have an instruction manual, I don't have a guide, I don't have, a reference point, a healthy reference point to say, like, this is how it was handled when I was a kid. I have to then go do the work and find out how to do that first for myself, so that then I can show my children that it's safe for them to express themselves in this way, and that, mommy's here, and, let's do this, let's do that, all of that kind of stuff I come into. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's
Good.
came through.
No, no, you did great. I have two things I want to say. First, I'm really curious because somebody told me the first number that comes to mind when you imagine yourself as a child, that's the age your inner child is. So is your inner child younger? Mine is about 9.
Mine always comes back to, I have different connections with different ages, but the one that really predominantly comes through for me is like around 3, 4.
So you were
That's
saying like that toddler bit, because that's why I was asking, because I was like, oh, like when I didn't start having, I don't want to say issues, but challenges with my daughter till she started to get a little older.
mm,
And there was a point at which my daughter said something and handled something very beautifully with me.
mm,
But I was the one having the tantrum
mm,
because my inner child was reacting. And she was like, what did I do? I'm like, nope. Mama's inner child is just having her say right now, there's nothing you did wrong. I'll share more with you in a little bit. I'm the one having the tantrum. I'm the one in the wrong, but just let me have this tantrum right now.
yeah.
And she was like, oh, okay. And then when I explained it all later, she was like, oh, I was like, you're being the adult. I'm not. I'm being the child right now. And she kind of liked that.
Yeah.
But when we can share that with them, that we're not perfect and we have wounds that we need to get over as well and heal, I should say, not get over. But that is comforting for them because when she has her time of acting out or whatever needs to come, she'll be like, "Oh, it's just my inner child's having a say." I always say like, "What does your inner child need? Does your inner child need a hug? Does it need some ice cream? Does it need to go play? Does it need the earth? Like, what does it need?" And oftentimes she always says, "I don't know." She's the I don't know queen because she needs a long time to process. Whereas in that moment, I know what I need, right? And it's either like an apology or it's some sort of way to feel validated. But she couldn't
Mm,
give that to me in that moment, right? I needed to give it to myself. And so I couldn't even imagine 4. So as we're going along on this journey, you have likely 4 different, very different personalities to handle, different stages of development to handle, as well as all of your own healing. So, how do you do it?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the age-old question that I get from everyone, when they find out that I have, 4 kids, 7 and under, and they are absolutely very unique from each other. And they all require, like, when you ask the question, like, what does your inner child need? In real time, I have to learn and discover what each child needs during those times when they are having, these kind of moments, right? These triggering moments for me, right? And for me, I am one first and foremost humbled by the parenting experience, so much so that I will never come across that I know it all, that I got it all together, all of that kind of stuff, and especially not around my kids. When I don't know something or when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I name it. That's the first and foremost thing, right? Like if it, like I will say it like out loud, mommy's feeling overwhelmed right now. And so for me, and then I will like voice what it is that I'm needing in that moment. So I'm kind of modeling it to them, right? And so like mommy's feeling very overwhelmed right now. Give me a minute. I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go have a couple of breaths. I'm gonna go take a couple of deep breaths, or go do some tapping, or I'm gonna go outside for some fresh air, that kind of a thing, right? And they'll never fight me on it. They just kind of observe, and they're like, okay. And then what happens is that for them, I'm like modeling for them so that there's been times when, for example, my daughter who's 7, she'll have like a moment, and she'll go into her room, and I've caught her in her room, kind of like regulating herself, like doing tapping, taking breaths and stuff. And I know that she's done that because she's seen me do these things, right? Versus me acting like I know it all, and that, I can't let them see me in this moment of weakness and all of that kind of stuff, and then go and seclude myself away from them. They're not going to know what I'm doing or any of that, right? And then when they're having experiences, they're going to copy that. They're going to retreat, those kind of things, right? And so I'm really raising my children and raising myself at the same time. That really is what it is. But what it looks like is really teaching them emotional safety that I didn't receive. Right. And so as I'm learning what that looks like for myself, I'm voicing it to them, right? And practicing the regulation when dysregulated in front of them. And then also learning about boundaries while holding space for theirs, right? So sometimes I don't have the capacity to hold space for all four of them if they're all, which doesn't often happen. I very rarely happens where all four of them are activated over something, right? But if and when it does occur, I will be the first to say, like, this is too much for me. It's overwhelming right now, and then here's what I'm gonna do, kind of thing, right? And can you help mommy with this? Can you, like, those kind of things? And I will kind of give them each things to kind of support the process altogether, right? And this co-regulation is so important. It really is. And sometimes all it is, like you said, like the validation, right? Validating that something happened, whether like your brother broke your Lego thing that you were just building for the past hour, and you feel extremely upset about that, and so, like, like naming it, it's like that's really tough that you spent all that time building this, and your brother came and destroyed it. That didn't feel good, right? And like, yeah, it didn't, and like oftentimes it's just like validating their experience de-escalates, the situation, the scenario, right? And like I've learned that through practice, right? So it's like when all else fails, I just voice, right? Like I will name the thing, and then from there it opens up a conversation and the safety to be able to then hold space for them. Once I kind of have that oxygen mask on myself, kind of thing, right? And so yeah, it's just learning, what each one needs. And there are some basics. Like for me, the basics are everybody wants to, these are human basics, right? We all want to be seen, heard, and understood, right? And if one of those things are missing, then we will find ways of being seen, heard, and understood. And they sometimes won't be good ways, right? Like I have one son who's very intense, and if he doesn't feel validated or seen in his experience, he'll do things so that he gets our attention, right? And it'll be sometimes it's negative things, like he'll like bug one of his siblings, and make his sibling cry or something like that, right? And it's just like, and I know that that's just him wanting that attention and that validation, even if it's negative, right? And so really understanding that for him, I need to like be on my A game, and like it's like, hey buddy, like I see that you're getting angry. And like I talk about this a lot actually, and my son again brought this forth the other day, where his favorite emotion is anger, and he loves to express himself in that way. And I've told him, like, you are okay. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel angry. It's just not okay to hurt somebody when you're angry, right? So he knows that. And so the other day he was really angry about something, and then I kind of like I kind of brought it up. It was like it was an intense kind of moment, and he's like, "You told me it was okay to be angry," and I was like, "Yes, I did tell you that, but what else did I say?" He's like, not to be mean. And I was like, exactly. I'm like, and you were being mean. You were like, your brother is feeling like you're being mean to him right now, you know? And so like, and then he was just like, okay. And then he's like, what, let's have a conversation, that kind of a thing, right? So it's very interesting. And sometimes it's like I'm learning and doing at this, like flying off the seat of my pants kind of thing, right? In the moment.
Yeah. You know, I'm finding that the way that I parent, and I'm so curious if this is how you are as well, if it's like a thing, right? Because if you do it too, then it must be a thing, is how I'm feeling. Um, I parent how I wanted to be parented,
Mhm.
meaning I give the love and the response and my house in terms of like how it's run, like you have four kids, so it's not going to be quiet, but our house is very quiet and calm. Like we don't have the TV on. Like I always wanted that because my house was, there were only three of us. If my brother was there, there was four, but it was so loud. There were always TVs on, and I felt like I could never talk to anybody, right?
Mhm.
And so now I feel like I parent my daughter and I respond to her from my inner child as to how I would have wanted my parents to respond to me. So my daughter's talking to me, my inner child will come in and say, I wish my parents would have said this. And that's what I say to her. Do you find yourself doing that?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that like I do believe in, kind of giving them what I didn't have. There's some foundational things like validation, like repair. Those are foundational things that I know that every child needs, right? Not just my kids, not just your kids. Every child needs these foundational safety, kind of things, boundaries, if you will, like in our homes, like if because we're not perfect, we are going to mess up no matter what kind of background you come from, all of that kind of stuff. But the key thing is acknowledging that and then making the repair, right? And so that's something that like universally we need that, right? But I also what I have been discovering in my four very different children is that in the ways that I wished I would have been parented, maybe it could match up with one or two of my kids, but the other ones have totally different needs. Right. And
Mhm.
so then that's when I'm at a loss because it's like, wait a minute, when I was a kid, I would have loved this. I would have needed this. But for them, it's not really, yeah, like for them, it's different kind of thing. Right. And so, yes, like I give them things that universally I know that every child needs. Like I said, like the example of repair. And I also learn to understand what exactly each one of them needs in moments to kind of de-escalate the situation, those kind of things. And oftentimes when I get, and this is something that I definitely want to bring forth because, you know, sometimes we can get in this mind frame that, oh, I'm not healed because I'm reacting in this way, right? So I'll use examples like, for example, yelling, right? Like, oh, like I yell at my kids, so therefore I'm not healed, and I'm just like mess up, and going down this big spiral, impatience, when we're impatient and always rushing and all of that kind of stuff, or even overwhelm, right? And what that really translates is that those are parts of me that are being revealed that aren't healed as a child, right? So they're not like my kids aren't triggering me by accident. They're triggering these unhealed parts of me that are asking for attention now. And now that I'm at this place in my life where I can give that attention, right? And solution seek and find and because I'm also learning about myself too. Right, because I can imagine what I needed when I was a child, but it could be very different when the actual situation arises and I feel the trigger from my kids, and then I'm trialing and error with them, and then I discover it's like all I really needed was a hug, like in this intense moment kind of thing, right? And so their behavior often activates that nervous system memory that we all have, right? And then that's when I get curious. I just get curious, like, wait a minute, like, okay, so this is what my nervous system is telling me right now, so now what I need to do to kind of get to this, the words coming up for me, this homeostasis, where there's this balance, and it's very different for each one of them, right? So
Yeah.
it's discovering me while I'm discovering them.
For sure. I discovered two things about my environment that will quickly trigger me. Number
Mhm.
one, feeling unappreciated because like
Mhm.
I'm given 1,010% all the time. So if you make me feel unappreciated, I'm gonna spiral out of control.
Mhm.
And yelling.
Mhm.
Yelling will set me off quick because I have always said to my husband, to my daughter, to anybody, you can say anything to me. It can be the worst possible thing on the face of this earth, and I will listen to you.
Mhm.
You don't need to yell. We can have a constructive conversation about it. We can be passionate. There's no need to yell at me. That
Mhm.
triggers me so much because I came from a yelling household. And so it in these situations, I have recognized myself and my own triggers. And
Mhm.
it's so funny. My husband has told my daughter, when mommy's mad, don't engage. Just whoosh, be quiet, let it pass. If mama's wrong, she'll come back and say sorry to you later. But just be quiet. It will serve you the best because I don't get mad often. So if
Mhm.
I'm mad, he's like, just leave her alone and just let her be mad. And so it's kind of funny because I'm learning more about myself now that I have a child than I think I ever would, right? Because
Mhm.
a spouse or a partner or a roommate or an adult, just any adult knows how to shift and regulate and adhere to the boundaries you're putting, whereas a child is constantly pushing those boundaries. And
Mhm.
so they're constantly pushing you outside your comfort zone beyond the imaginable,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, and it's I think because sometimes the way I've described it early on when I had no idea what to do when, these big feelings were happening, when, the tantrums, the meltdowns, all of that kind of the pushback, right? Like, um, yeah, like for me, it was just like, sorry, I just like lost my train of thought about that. I was gonna bring up a point about that.
Oh, what I was saying was is how adults know how to conform to the
Oh,
boundaries.
yes, 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 yes. Yeah. So what I was thinking of is like, there were moments early on in my parenting journey where I was tantruming right alongside them. Like they're having like their 2, 3 year old tantrum, and I am too. Mommy is too. And it's just like, and here I am, this grown adult. But that was my inner child having this moment too. Of dysregulation and all of that kind of stuff, right? And going back to what you asked about earlier about giving our kids what we didn't receive, right? Like again, those universal things that every child needs. I was just thinking about how powerful it's been, not only for myself, um, but even for my kids to give them the things like emotional validation, right? Like I talked about validating their emotions. Yes, that's, you're feeling this, you're naming it, all that kind of stuff. Giving them the safety to express themselves no matter how messy it is, no matter how hard it is sometimes, like for them to feel safe to be that way, right? And being seen and heard, and then not being shamed for those feelings. Because, I remember as a kid, I've always been a very deeply feeling person, since I can remember. And one of my go-to emotions was crying, right? Like if I was angry, I'd cry. If I was hurt, I would cry. If I was scared, I would cry. And I would get so shamed over that. Oh, here she comes the waterworks. Oh, here comes the crybaby. All of those kind of things, right? And it got to the point, as I grew up, I would suppress that in me because I didn't want to be made fun of. I didn't want to be looked at as weak, all of that kind of stuff, right? And as a mother to a daughter and 3 sons, like two of my sons are deeply feeling, they're very in their feels, and I will never, ever, ever shame them for crying tears, like and that for me is like giving them what I didn't receive, right? So just meeting them in that place, both love and grief at the same time, because I'm grieving the fact that I never got that, as a child. And I'm also celebrating the fact that I'm able to give it to them now, even when I didn't have the resources to give from. I have to build those resources myself, right? And that really is the work.
Yes, it is. Okay. If you could give one takeaway today to a parent, what would it be?
I've been thinking a lot because we just came home from a family vacation, and one of the things that I asked them before we left was, what are you most looking forward to? And what they every one of them said was presence, right? So your child isn't asking you to be perfect. You know, there is no such thing as perfection. They're just asking you to be present with them. And that really does go a long way. And we can't do that if we're not present with ourselves, right? So it's that whole scenario of giving the oxygen mask first to yourself before you can give it to your children. You know, like don't strive for perfection, strive for presence, right? And give that first and foremost to yourself, and it'll spill over to your children, and they will just love you for it, you know, because that's all they really need in most of the times is a hug and presence.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that because our next episode is all about addiction numbing and returning to yourself. And so, if you're loving this series, definitely like, share, subscribe, comment below, helps us in the algorithm, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.